Hello and welcome to Summoning Saturdays. It is Saturday night, not January. It's not January yet. It's still December. It's December 2022, December 31st, 2022. I'm so good at this. All right. It is about 9:30 p.m. my locality. So I've got about 2.5 hours until it's 2023. And summoning Saturdays usually lasts about an hour, so this will be going till about 10:30 p.m. my time. I'm in Pacific Standard Time. I'm right near Portland, Oregon. So, um, summoning Saturdays right now. This is Link. Hi. I'm Felix's other self, subconscious, higher self, whatever you want. I get to take over on summoning Saturdays and sort of do a show on spirits from a spirit's point of view is kind of how we've been thinking about it. So, and it's kind of fun to do it on Saturday night because we're big fans of Saturday Night Live. So there's kind of like an energy we notice on Saturday nights that's not really like any other kind of night. Like we tried recording this we tried recording this um in the early hours of the morning. It was technically Saturday, it was technically nighttime, but it wasn't Saturday night, and it just didn't work. It was like a rehearsal, but it wasn't really the real thing. There's something about it being live, something very, very important about it being live, in my opinion. Hold on a second. And block an LED that was a little too bright. Um, so something about it being live really helps me come through as a spirit to talk to people. And I don't really know what that is. We've been discussing it recently, and I think one of the only ways for us to find out what it is that makes it different when it's live is to just keep doing it, and also to do recorded rehearsals beforehand and just keep on observing what the differences are between the two occurrences. Um, One of the things is that I noticed there's a part of the self that seems to know when this is the one. If you've watched speed runs, then you know what I mean. If you've watched any speed runs, and then there's attempts. If you've watched speed run attempt videos, you've seen sure plenty of times whenever they lose the attempt and they've got to start over. And there's like a lot of times during those failed runs that it really seems like that's going to be the run, and it's not the run. It just doesn't end up being the run. But then you see the run that ends up being the run that gets the world record. And there's always just something about it. There's a kind of energy that's there that's not anywhere else. And I feel that a lot of times speedrunners and pretty much any other kind of racer, any kind of athletic performer, and in my opinion, they probably have to spend a lot of time blocking out the awareness of, is this the run? Because if every single time that you started a race you knew whether or not you were going to win or lose, why would you run the whole race? So I think that awareness of whether or not this is going to be the big successful one, um like it's there whenever it is the run, but when it's not the run you don't really have it, and you kind of don't think about it. It's weird. So, like, there was a different vibe to the rehearsal than there was for this live recording here, and that vibe, that's something that we kind of want to play around with and see if we can spot more of that. If there really is more of a way to feel out these psychic senses of, I had to guess, precognition, because it seems like if like humans do have a sense of precognition, but it's often blocked by the humans themselves to be able to go through day-to-day everyday life. But there's times when it comes through to help facilitate either day-to-day life or to get to a further milestone than one could possibly reach in their day-to-day life just by going about normal means. And what what makes it switch on? What's the difference between when it's not occurring and when it is occurring? We've been noticing that psychic ability seems to be very reactive to the environment. It's very reactive to what's happening in your life, to context. It's not very easy to switch it on and off. It's very much like creative ability. For instance, any writer will tell you that when it's not coming through, it's not coming through. You can sit down and write as much as you want, but like if you've got writer's block, then you can just sit down and keep on hitting the E key. You're not going to do much of anything else. So when it's not coming through, it's not coming through. When it's not time, it's not time. And so, what is it that determines when it's time? Is it something astrological? Is it the weather? Is there some kind of strange radiation source or atmosphere that's randomly generating particles? What is it that causes this? What is it that causes it to be time for psychic or supernatural phenomena to occur? And what is it that makes everything be normal otherwise? So one of the reasons this is really interesting kind of place to explore is because we've tried to find we've researched who's done psychic testing before. There's Yale has done psychic testing. I believe there was some at Stanford. There's at prestigious universities. There has been parapsychology, and there has been the testing of parapsychology experiments, and plenty of those were on telepathy, were on precognition. Everyone knows the Zener cards, like the ones you have the star and the square and the wavy lines. I've got a set somewhere. Like those were employed for quite a while to test out human psychic ability, and we didn't really get anywhere with that. One of the big things in the way was that if one considers the possibility of precognition, it is very difficult to truly test whether or not someone is able to get knowledge that's outside of their brain, because you don't really know if they get the knowledge from somewhere else or if they get the knowledge from their brain future. And it's really difficult to test this out because, for instance, if I say, okay, well, I'm going to try to psychically figure out what's the plot of the next Pirates in the Caribbean movie, or Pirates of the Caribbean, sorry. I'm going to figure out the next Pirates movie, and I'll predict the plot, and I'll promise that I'll never watch it, so that you know that I'm not getting this through precognition. I'm getting it through other means. The thing is, I don't know if I'll end up watching in the future. I don't know if I'll end up getting spoilers on the plot, because it's like not even having to watch it, and which I might, by surprise, find out what happens in it. Like someone might have a conversation around me, and I just happen to overhear it, and then find out a bunch of details I never thought I would know. And so my precognition is the thing that might have given me the info instead of whatever other means I tried. So, like that's something that really complicates things, is trying to figure out, is there anything that time is responsible for that we're not factoring in our experiments? And I mean that basically happened for 50 years until they basically gave up. There's just no funding in this area anymore. No one really That basically happened for 50 years until they basically gave up. There's just no funding in this area anymore. You did know how to test it. Whenever you finally did prove that it existed, what would you do? I think this is actually something that I want to talk about. Is like the future of psychic ability. What would that look like if you discovered telepathy right now? If everyone knew that everyone around them could read their minds, wouldn't that make work like really stressful? Like, wouldn't that make a lot of situations really stressful? Just if you didn't know whether or not the people around you could read your mind, then I think you would behave different. And I think a lot of people in this world would behave different if they were aware of the fact that people around them could read their minds. I think people would be using a lot more like little talismans and stuff to try to block people's psychic transmissions. I think you'd see a lot more use of ephemera like that, evil eye charms, stuff like that. But I also think that you'd see people being a lot more guarded, possibly being a bit more aware of just what it is that they're thinking all the time, because they're aware of the fact that everybody's aware of what it is they're thinking all the time. It's one thing I've sometimes experienced as a telepath, by the way. I pick up people's thoughts all the time that are around me, and so I can tell when people are being homophobic. Like I can tell whenever they're having racist thoughts. And sometimes it's because I can just pick up the microaggressions, or I can pick up like the weird little ticks that they have, that like they look at people as scans who are a different color than them, or whenever actors who aren't white come up, they always act derogatory about them. I can pick up logical things like that, but a lot of times I just pick up like that they've got a vibe. I just pick up the racist or homo vibe. And the reason why I picked up those vibes in particular, by the way, is because I grew up in a rather racist area. It was in South Louisiana. And I noticed that if people were racist, they would often be unsafe for me to be around as well. So, like, I kind of just picked up that racism itself was probably a danger to me, even though I was white. Um, that people who were discriminating against people who were a different color than them were probably going to discriminate against me for some reason that they would make up. Because discriminating against people for their skin color is a made up reason. So if they're going to make up that reason, they're going to make up another reason to not like me. Didn't really expect to be in this territory, but I think one of the important things to talk about is how this crosses over with psychic awareness, um, and maybe why people are like kind of, I'd say, pressured not to be psychically aware. Um, there's all of this stuff that you're supposed to assume the best of people at all times, or at least certain situations. You're supposed to give people all of these chances to do certain things. But what if you all could tell from your like mental awareness of this person's thoughts that they had no intention of ever doing the right thing? Like, what if we could just Elon's mind and be like, no, there's no way that Elon is ever going to run Twitter right. He it's on his mind that he's never going to do that. Like, he's already decided to run it into the ground. Like, what if someone could read Elon Musk's mind and know that he'd already decided to run Twitter into the ground? Then why would anybody sit around and wait for him to like do anything? They'd already kind of know what he decided. Um, it would be a completely different world if you knew what was on someone's mind. And I think that's the biggest reason why like human awareness of their own psychic abilities is going to take quite a while. Because it's going to take quite a while for it to be safe to be known as being psychic. It's very interesting right now being out as a psychic. Most people who are out as psychics, they either go into the guru space, where they've got like a lot of people who are very conducive to all kinds of different ways of thinking, and whether or not you're hearing voices is of the least of anyone's concern when it comes to the guru space, because there's just so many other things to be looking out for in that area, since it's just so full of con men. And then like the other space that psychics typically are in the space of divination, fortune telling, psychic advice, uh, hotlines, hourly in person readings, palmistry, Chinese face reading. There's all kinds of different ways that you can do divination, but basically, if you can provide a service that can be monetized on an hourly basis, then you can actually support yourself with your psychic abilities. So most people who are known as psychics are known as psychics because they're doing it for their job. That's basically the psychic gurus and um, the psychic readers. They're the ones that we kind of know in our society to be like, people with special mental powers. After that, it all typically goes into the either the area of religion or like performance, when you have mentalists or you have people who appear on America's Got Talent and you don't really know how they did that thing that looks like it might have been telepathy, but they've got like a skit for it so that they can charge people money to like show up and see a demonstration of it. Being able to do that with psychic ability and have it regularly show up on time and fit in with the show, it's kind of like to get an animal to perform. And in that they have the same difficulty when it comes to performing animals, which is why it's pretty amazing whenever you see a really good animal act on something like America's Got Talent or any other kind of performing show like that. Everyone knows it's so hard to get animals to work on the same schedule as humans and to sync up with humans and just very much trust and listen to humans. That seeing it happen is just like mind blowing. But it's also quite rare because you have to so be like just really in control of it being safe. And it's so hard to go through an experience of any kind of psychic ability and ensure ahead of time that everything is going to be safe. So I think that's one of the reasons why the live thing helps for my experience in particular, is because being able to demonstrate on a live recording, not even demonstrate, but just being able to talk on a live recording, for me, it establishes a level of trust. I don't have somebody coming after me and cleaning up stuff and editing. I know all of this is going out, that someone could see it without it being filtered. I think that there being a, a lack of opportunity to filter something does change the experience. It establishes a level of trust that I think is very important. Um, and that level of trust really needs to be there for your psychic ability to actually manifest and come out in a way that is on time, that isn't just reactionary. You've got the trained horse that is also treated the right way on set and therefore behaves the right way and works with the act the right way on set and therefore behaves the right way and works with the act. And then you've got the untrained horse where they don't act right around it and it just causes utter chaos and destroys the set because they didn't actually prepare for it. So both horses could be live, but only one of them you really want to be live. But if you were going to have them on a live act, if someone brings an animal on a live act, like there's been a couple of times I've seen dogs on SNL, and I know that they're basically have a dog live on SNL, and there's a lot of times where the dog is just like looking in the direct the actor, and they're like constantly trying to get the dog's attention and stuff live on camera. That's the joke, though. Like the joke is that it's live and it's hard to get the attention of the animal on live camera. And I don't know why, but that is just so much more effective than say just recording a but that is just so much more effective than say just recording a good dog act. I don't think anybody's really interested in a good dog act. They're really more interested to see like, how does the dog actually deal with the reality and how does everyone around the dog deal with the reality of the dog. I think that the dog is in fact kind of reality. inserted into the set of Saturday Night Live, and everybody in on the set of Saturday Night Live now has to react to a dose of reality, and that in itself, I think, that's the real skit. So I think that maybe the live connection brings in a dose of reality. Um, Maybe it brings in reality itself. Right now, you can pre-record so many things, you can act out so many things. But when it's live, I think you just show up all the way because there's really no other way to give it your all when it's live than to show up all the way. And when it's live, you really have to give it your all because there's no second chance. So in a way, the live connection kind of compels of you to show up, and that extra 10%, that may be the part that has the higher self in it. Extra 10% is really important if you're distilling. I think at some point we might do an episode or at least do a video or something on distilling, actually, because there's a lot of spirit work when it comes to making drinkable spirits, as it were. And you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised just how much the spirit world's POV really converges with the process of distilling liquor. But there's a reason why both are called spirits. At one point, the same people were talking about spirits and were making observations on spirits who were also making spirits. So let's talk about 2023. We're at 22 minutes in, so I think it's appropriate. 2022 has been pretty rough, and I think everyone's agreed on that. I saw something on Tumblr saying, congratulating everyone for surviving 2020 again. And I agree. That is exactly the vibe that everyone's got about 2022. There have been many times where I felt very bad during the year of 2022, and I just didn't understand how things could be so awful, how we could be going through what we were going through, and like why we would be going through this. Was there something special about us that was making us go through something just this bad? And then we would find that someone else was going through not only something bad, but something very similar. There's been so many times where I've been going through something, feeling alone during 2022, and I'll read the news, I'll read Tumblr, I'll watch something on YouTube and see someone going through just a remarkably similar experience. Not the same at all, but just so similar that it took me out of the misery of my experience and just made me wonder, like, wow, how can all of us be going through the same things at the same time? Like, we're all so separate right now, but apparently we're all going through the same thing together on some level. That was really amazing to me. I still don't really know exactly what it means that we're all going through these things together. But we all do seem to be going through these things together. And so whenever I feel compelled to do a live thing every Saturday, even though I don't think that a lot of people are going to show up whenever it's happening, but I just think it's important to do anyway. There's something important about it being live. There's something important about it being on Saturday night. Then I'm just going to do that because I feel that's just my way of showing up. I don't know why that's my way of showing up. I don't know why that place and time of showing up, but it is. So what's going to show up in 2023? Because 2022 kind of felt like the year of finding out, like, who's, like, what are you really committed to? 2022 had to be the year of figuring out what you were really committed to, because I found so many people were doing things, launching things, creating things, sticking through things, that were so hard to do. And they had started them thinking that they would be pretty simple to do or pretty straightforward to do, or that they were prepared for it pretty well, because before 2020 everything seemed like it was going to be a lot different. And they were still going through with it. They were going to go ahead. They'd figured out a way. They'd found a new way. They were going to try a new thing. And like, I've been right there with everyone else trying these new things, and just really trying to figure out what is it that we're all going towards. What is it that we're all building? When are we going to create the next thing, and what is the next thing? And I think 2023 is going to have the next thing. So one thing we're really excited about is ITER. ITER, ITER, is Latin for go forward. And ITER is the world's largest and most complicated machine that we know of to date. It is going to be a fusion generator that generates enough fusion to power, I think, a nearby village. It will be a demonstration of proof of concept. We've already managed to do net gain fusion, where we actually got more energy out of the reaction than we put in. That happened in, I think Fermilab did that, or no, it wasn't Fermilab, but it was a lab in the U.S. And ITER is actually going to be on the scale where you could start generating power for a particular purpose. It still will not be on the scale where it can power the whole world, but by the end of it, every single country that participates in it will have contributed something for the machine to work, and it will not work unless everyone contributes their parts. I am still amazed that ITER exists. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. They are still delivering on this, even in the middle of a war, even with what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. Russia's delivering their parts, and there's no way to actually expel a country from the ITER project. So they are accepting Russia's parts. I don't know if they'll use them, but I expect that Russia is actually contributing parts in earnest. The people who are working on ITER, who are Russian, are not the people who have decided to go to war. And some of them have basically just been staying in Marseille, continuing to work on faith that this project will go forward and that things will be able to work out. And that, I know of no other project on this planet like that. I'm quite amazed at any project right now that can transcend human politics, and this is one of them. First fusion is supposed to be in 2025. 2024 is when it will have its first test fire. So that's the first time it'll really turn on. 2023 is going to be where we find out whether or not that schedule is still if that schedule is actually still going to be that schedule. We're going to be having that time frame still, or if it's going to have backed up. At the same time, the Large Hadron Collider is now firing again after having been recalibrated and fixed, since it actually had a thing wrong with it before, so it wasn't using its full power. And it is gradually being fired up to full power, I believe. Now, right now, the LHC is in a dormancy period, so I believe we don't get any fires over maybe November to January, or maybe it's just December and January. But I remember there being an off period in the winter, and then they fire it up again and kind of keep it going for basically 10 months. They're doing that for 4 years. So there's a lot of very powerful reactions taking place on planet Earth in the next few years at the same time as society is going through quite a lot of very powerful transformations. And I find that very significant. I see a lot of prophecies often about the Aquarian Age, the Kali Yuga, um, all these different things that are supposed to be transpiring and coming into play. But it's very interesting to see things like ITER and the LHC actually transpire at the same time as people are talking about these big concepts. Because if someone's talking about, all of the world coming together and creating an energy that causes no pollution and is from the force of um, unity itself, well, guess what? That's a fusion generator. We call that ITER. That's a tokamak. So it really feels like we're entering the future. Um, every cyberpunk dystopia story that I've read since the late 80s has basically resembled the reality that I'm stepping into next year. I mean, we we have every element of a cyberpunk dystopia that one would be looking for. Um, we may not have it to the degree that everybody wants, but if you think about an 80s movie that was about a cyberpunk dystopia, you would often see like the props be kind of janky, even though they were trying to depict something that was supposed to be highly technological and super advanced. But what if the reason they looked janky is because the future that they were depicting wasn't actually as advanced as we thought it was? Total Recall would be a good example of like that very high tech futureness, but also clunkiness. Also, in Total Recall, there's a big question of whether you were on Mars to begin with. It was the whole thing a hallucination or like a basically a result of a short in the system? Was it all just his brain being stuck in an eternal hallucination, and therefore he never went to Mars in the first place? That's very interesting, considering that we've got Elon Musk right now, who's been saying that he's going to take humanity to Mars by, like, I don't know, next year or something. But I mean, if you read the science on it, it's actually impossible for humans to survive long term on Mars. There's not enough gravity. That's just physically, it's not possible. Um, just like on the moon, we can't survive long on the moon. There's not enough gravity. But they're not planning on surviving long term on the moon. The moon is supposed to be just a base that you can do refueling and other stuff on. But there's like, if you have somebody who's an astronaut who stays on the International Space Station, weightlessness in space. So on Mars, there's, I think, 70%, 80% Earth gravity. That's enough to actually make it not sustainable for us to live on biologically. Our bodies aren't made for that. And so when it comes to how we're going to colonize Mars, really the answer is we're not. Now, we might be able to put some other kind of animal or some other kind of organism or robot on Mars to do stuff there long term. And then we visit Mars. People go to Mars for a couple of months and they come back and they recover. But the human body can't live on Mars. So anyone who's promising to bring us to Mars in a certain amount of years is lying. It's just plain and simple lying. It's not physically possible. That's very interesting, considering how many stories that were written in the last, say, 50 or 70 years have been projecting that by 2020 or 2030 or 2050 we'll be having this like flying car, holographic idol singers, fusion energy, uh, kind of technological miracle, but everybody's still miserable. Well, maybe it's because the technology is not as good as we thought it was. Maybe that's just polish. Maybe the holographic projections of the idol singers, that's just a laser show, and they don't really have anything but a laser show. I think that's a lot closer to the reality that we're going to see in the next few decades. And what's interesting is that the reason why we're going to see that reality is because of the chip shortage. You've got a resource and chip shortage when it comes to actually creating this technology that could be, you just don't have enough lithium to do it. And you're not going to be able to get enough lithium for quite a long time. So that societal transformation can't happen without the right technology, the right resources, and the right resource allocation, the right international agreements. I mean, if somebody's got all the lithium and the rest of the world needs the lithium to be able to do their technology, then somebody's going to make an agreement to distribute all the lithium. So it's interesting to see in the present moment all of these things that were kind of predicted as the future, how they're really panning out now. And I would say take any stories that have been very popular in the last 20 years. I'd say the Hunger Games would be a big one, and project that out to the next 25 years. Take whatever's in there that seems way too hyperbolic and either extrapolate it to something that would make more sense or just throw it out. For instance, the Hunger Games, I think the most unbelievable thing is the fact they have a bunch of games that kill each other with. There's a bunch of popular stories about that right now. There's Squid Game, there's Battle Royale. You've got all these. There's other stories that are coming out like The Menu. That's one where they go to a private island to get a special meal, and it turns out everybody's going to die. And this kind of like everybody's going to die because of this weird little ritual thing that we're doing. Kind of entertainment is pretty prevalent right now and kind of weird. But what if that is in fact the hyperbole that's being projected? What if that's just not going to be the case and it's going to be just like a more normal thing? Then you'd see people's kids competing against each other all the time to get different states and different countries status. But the competition wouldn't necessarily be one where only the last one standing gets to be alive. It may just be more something like the Olympics. In fact, there's many times where I have assumed that the Hunger Games was just like a very hyperbolic retelling of the Olympics. And it's interesting that we're seeing things like the Olympics very controversial in the last few years. The last couple of Olympics have been pretty controversial, and we've had a very controversial World Cup. So maybe you're going to see a lot of sporting events being very controversial, more extreme than people want. There is a lot of discussion right now about getting compensation for college athletes, the NCAA. And so I think that probably child stars and child athletes are going to be a big part of politics and the economy. Everyone's trying to get the next edge. Everyone's trying to score the goal before they even play the game. And I mean, you're seeing that with like celebrity kids getting special treatment at universities. You had somebody go to jail for that, Lori Loughlin. The stratification of society is a really, really big theme that's been happening the last few years. And I think that you're going to see more evidence of it in 2023. I think that's going to get worse before it gets better, in that people are going to be seeing more of it. Like it's going to be much more evident, the nepotism, until it's actually undone. And I do think that it will be undone to a certain extent. I don't think nepotism will ever fully go away, but I think that people's blindness to it is going to go away because it's just too obvious now. It's been hiding in plain sight with people changing their last names, so it's not so obvious that this person's their sister and this person's their brother and this person's their uncle and this person's their father. But at some point, you do notice that like the same families are basically acting in everything. And it's getting a little boring. I think the reason why podcasts have been so popular as a form of entertainment is because it was a very open, and still is a very open venue that anyone can break into. So it's not so filtered, and you don't have to wait for Hollywood to figure out whose nephew gets to be on that thing. You can just have a good thing happen, and that nephew can go get his free job somewhere else. Um, so a lot more discovery of nepotism, a lot more. I am expecting a lot of like kind of secrets coming out, things getting exposed, things being unveiled. Wouldn't be surprised if you had a few Kennedy files come out that no one was expecting. Um, just it definitely seems like a year where you're going to have to prove what it is that you've been saying all this time, and that there's going to be some surprises as to who has the proof and who doesn't have the proof, and what the proof really says. You may even find out whether the proof is in the pudding or not. I don't know whether it's going to be in the pudding. So I feel like this is like a nice little lull here. I'm going to take a moment to have a little break. So just give me a moment. I feel like predicting stuff in the financial markets, but I don't want to be someone who like tells somebody which investments you should be doing. It's just more like calling some shots there, because there's going to be a lot of action in the financial markets in terms of regulation and such. A lot of the truth coming out stuff is actually going to be in the financial markets, in the financial area. And if you want drama to be entertained, just keep on watching that space. It's going to be a fun time to actually read the business section. It's going to be a time to read the Financial Times, because there's just going to be a lot of stuff going down. Everything's going to be visible. A lot of the reasons why everybody is so used to financial crimes not being punished is because they're able to easily bury them. But what if they're not able to easily bury them anymore because there's nowhere to bury it? There's no way to bury it. And guess what? Everybody's going to see it. Just a second. So, expect a lot more information than you would expect. um, I think that there's going to be a lot of feelings of being inundated with information in 2023. And all the information that was blocked before and that was being suppressed before, well, if all that comes out at once, then you're going to kind of have a glut of information, and digesting that quickly and disseminating it quickly to the masses is going to be a very needed skill. People are going to be trying to find good news sources, good information sources, to figure out like what's legitimate and what is, I don't want to say fake news, but like what is just hyperbole. Um, with Twitter being less of a go-to source for everything, I'm going to say there's going to be a lot of more diversification of news sources. Um, uh, there were a lot of journalists who were trying to kind of privatize their work, and make kind of a subscription service, so that Substack was it, the subscription service where you could read a journalist's articles for a certain fee. Um, that model is going to get turned on its head, because they're going to want to also be able to, basically, with Twitter not being so journalist friendly anymore, they're going to want to take stuff like Substack and diversify it. So you might have a lot more independent venues where journalists release their work, and you might be able to get it in new ways, in different ways than just reading it in newspaper's website. Um, that would make a lot of sense considering that Facebook's dealing with some flack about how they present news and dealing with some lawsuits from the news industry. So, how information is disseminated to people and how they consume it could actually go through quite a lot of very drastic changes in 2023. Things that people don't expect. Just there was a lot of surprise over the changes that happened to Twitter. A lot of people had their businesses depending on Twitter, and are still really being caught scrambling when it comes to like, hey, what do I use as an alternative to Twitter? So you see that happening now. Now imagine that happening to 5 platforms at once. Imagine it happening everywhere at once. Then you're gonna see a lot of information chaos. It might even feel apocalyptic in nature, although it's not going to be. A good book to refer to when it comes to this phenomenon would be Snow Crash. In the beginning, they predict that there's just going to be this total crash of information because people like lose all coherency over a virus that kind of uninstalls the ability to do language. That's what the snow crash is. And well, that's not what happens. Instead of different things happen. And so, you're not going to have a kind of technological Armageddon. You're just going to have different stuff. Maybe people are going to start figuring out a different way to power things now that it's quite obvious that lithium batteries are not the solution. I think that actually could be quite possible considering that Elon Musk is facing a very public failure when it comes to his ability to provide as many Teslas as he said he was going to provide. Part of the failure to provide all of the electric vehicles that he says that he wants to deliver is the fact that you need to put batteries in them, and those batteries require lithium, and that's really hard to get right now. Even just being able to manufacture those batteries is very difficult. So it's been a very detailed look at what you're looking at in 2023. I wasn't expecting to go through all of that, but I just think it's very important to look at these things just very specifically, and to think about, like, for instance, with the lithium, how does that impact you right now, and how do you impact it? How many things do you use right now that require lithium? And if you don't know, how would you find out? How does lithium benefit you? Does all the lithium around us actually affect us psychically or spiritually? And lithium is also a medication that makes us think differently. So I'm very interested if the presence of lithium in our electronics that we use for communication on some level affects how our minds are communicating on a psychic or a psychological level, if there's something that it does. So I really think it's important to keep track of all these chemical elements and to notice, for instance, because those are actually alchemically and astrologically important and spiritually important just as much as they're important to the world in terms of resources. So sometimes I'll be tracking things in terms of, like, what's the metals market looking like? And I don't really care as an investor. I care what the metals market looks like because silver is spiritually resonant with the moon, and it has to do with dream work and seeing beyond the veil, the subconscious. So if silver is seeing a lot of activity in the market, there may be something else going on astrologically that has to do with the moon. And like, I'm not an astrologer, and it's kind of hard for me to read astrological charts, but it's very easy for me to read the metals market, because the metals market, I mean, there's like a little chart right there that says how it's doing. And it's highly available at all times because there's so many people in the business world who need to be knowing at all times what what the metals market is doing. So like that information I find easy to access and I find easy to interpret. So if there's any correlation between that and astrology, if I can look at the metals market and see how it's acting, and that corresponds to astrology, then the metals market is basically a shortcut to astrology. If astrology, if everything correlates with astrology, then if you use something consistently to get a vibe on what's going on with the world and it corresponds with astrology, then you use it as you can use that in place of astrology. That that's one way that you can do divination. It's just that it's different than pulling cards or rolling dice. It's more about tracking observations over time and tracking change over time and seeing what those changes typically correspond to. That kind of work is a more long term kind of work, and you really have to commit to one thing when it. That kind of work is a more long term kind of work, and you really have to commit to one because otherwise it's really hard to keep track of a whole bunch of different things. So, I mean, you can do there's several different ways that you can do this, but basically, I keep track of the metals market slash, sometimes some financial stuff and stocks, important people, celebrities, politics, all that kind of goes together. You can basically like read politics and spy on the business section and basically know all that stuff day to day. Very, very easy to keep up with. So I don't have to waste a lot of time on it. Then the other way that I do things is that I keep up with movie trailers and like whichever movies are coming out when, how well they're doing, how well people think they're going to do, how much anticipation is built up for them. That usually tells me what kind of ideas are really exciting people in the moment. What kind of ideas people don't really like, aren't very popular, um, and kind of just I don't know some of the broader psychological makeup of the world. It's very interesting to see it reflected in the popular entertainment that's coming out. It's very interesting to see how people receive certain concepts at the time and also how those concepts are presented at first. I do this a lot with movie trailers. I think I've probably seen um I know I've seen everyone's seen more movie trailers than they've seen movies, but um I purposely seek out movie trailers far more than I purposely seek out movies at this point. So if you want to get like kind of a pulse on what's going to be coming up in the world, look at upcoming movies for 2023. And if you want to do this as an experiment, watch a bunch of upcoming movie trailers for 2023 and then see how 2023 goes as those movies come out. For instance, if something's coming out in January 2023, then see how the reception of that movie is. And like if it's received very well, then see if like plot elements or story elements, character elements, whatever of that movie, if they show up in January 2023. Now, if the movie is received poorly and there's no elements of that show up in January 2023, whereas if it's received well and there are elements that show up, that might be interesting. That might show that audience acceptance of the movie is an indicator of how accurate it's going to be. Another possibility is that audience acceptance is showing you what culturally are popular ideas at the time, and what culturally are ideas that just aren't going to really be in high acceptance. There's a lot of different ways that it can go, but I notice that it changes per genre. For instance, if you want to know about cultural fears and generally like intense emotions, psychological stuff, then you're going to want to watch a lot of horror movie trailers because that's what that's all about. Intense emotions, psychological stuff, then you're going to want to watch a lot of horror movie trailers because that's what that's all about. Also, stuff like social mores, um, ethics, morals, those all tend to show up in horror movies. Now, um, if you want to say figure out more where technology is going to go, then of course you're going to want to look at science fiction. And from there, I think it just kind of becomes obvious, how to cater your movie trailer watching to what it is that you want to know about the world. But this is kind of a sort of a long-term experiment. You're at least going to want to devote a couple of months to it to see how it pans out in real time, because you're going to want to compare a few different months worth of movies to really see whether the results are actually working or if it's just coincidental. But this is useful enough for me that I'm often not surprised whenever things happen in the news, because some movie trailers were already giving me the idea that that's how things were going to go. And it's nice to have a heads up on things. Um, the reason this works out so well for me is because I'm a fan of movies. I also have difficulty watching horror movies, so I love watching horror movie trailers and sometimes just leaving it at that. And I'm just interested in how movies are culturally accepted and how perception of them changes over time. Sometimes a movie is popular far after it comes out too. So you can also just keep an eye on, like, which movies are popular on YouTube right now, which movies are being discussed in social media. And so if, like, everybody's talking about The Godfather recently, then see if there's some kind of idea in The Godfather that has cultural relevance right now, and that's what's um, making it rise in everyone's subconscious and making them pay attention to it. So I'd say 2023. I've seen a few movie trailers out there. There's one called I think it's like 62 BC, 62 million BC. Um, it's got Adam Driver in it, and it's basically uh, like if Planet of the Apes were crossed over with Jurassic Park. Like, he's doing space exploration or he's driving a colony ship or something. There's like a lot of people on the ship, but like only he and someone else survived the crash, and they crash, and it looks like they're on Earth because there's like dinosaurs and stuff. So they're actually like 62 million years in the past on Earth. They somehow time traveled, and that one has just been really striking me as very interesting. And Adam Driver, he's he's got a lot of potential. Like he's like got like a really good career ahead of him, and people really pay a lot of attention to him. Like Kylo Ren was like a character that I was not expecting everybody to fall in love with, but I think that was all Adam Driver. Um, so like, I think something about that one is really going to be there's probably going to be some stuff in that movie that really is culturally relevant, I think. Um, Otherwise, I don't know. I That's the only one that's really given me a vibe. I think the Barbie movie might be big. Um, like I in terms of sleepers, I'd say the Barbie movie. Yeah, don't be surprised if that just like culturally rules 2023. It's got Margot Robbie in it, so I mean that's kind of a no-brainer. But also, there's just I don't know if you've seen the trailer for the Barbie movie, but it references 2001: Space Odyssey, and in a way that no child right now who plays with Barbie dolls would possibly understand the trailer for the Barbie movie. It's that much of a cultural film reference. Um, so it's obviously a trailer that's made for the parents of people who are playing with Barbies. Um, so that already signals to you that there's going to be a lot there to watch if you're an adult. It's not just going to be a movie that's entirely made for kids, and there's going to be nothing for you to engage with that's deeper. Um, it's interesting that they're trying to compel to the adults first instead of trying to attract children. But again, that may actually tell you more about the movie and what it's really going to be about. But that one, Um, that one I think is going to be something to watch. So it's going to be 2023, a big movie for dinosaurs and Barbie. There you go. Looking forward to it. See you then.